Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. This episode opens with an interview with Claire Cox, herself a poet and the development officer for Oxford Brookes University's Poetry Centre. She describes the work of this nebulous entity, which exists in no particular place, but is a research centre made up of its members. In particular, she talks about the work of Ignitionpress, the centre's publishing company, which has issued a series of high-quality poetry pamphlets. She talks about how the press began, how poets are selected for publication, the editing and mentoring process, and associated courses offered by Brookes to help poets get their work into print. We then hear a sample of 4 poets reading a poem from their pamphlets, and we finish with an extract from a reading by Fathima Zahra, whose impressive debut pamphlet, Sargam, Swargam, was published by Ignitionpress. Between these bookends from Brookes, you will hear a range of poets whose work I'm sure you will enjoy, including Dinah Livingstone, Richard Lister, Lizzie Ballagher, Vanessa Lampert, and Mervyn Linford. More information about individual poets and about the Brookes Poetry Centre can be found on the website poetryworthhearing.biz. So here now is Claire Cox talking about the work of the Poetry Centre at Oxford Brookes University.
The Oxford Brookes Poetry Centre, I think, was established in 1998, so a little bit before my time. It works as an independent research centre, so there are quite a lot of them around the university, which kind of focuses for different research interests. So this one, it's situated within the English school, and it's a focus for research on poetry and into poetry. So the current members range from anything from early modern, so 1500s, through to avant-gardes, through to contemporary. So it's quite a broad and sort of permeable research centre. It's had different focuses and iterations depending on the directors. There have been 3 directors since I've been there. So they slightly shape it to their interests, if you like. So currently Neil Monroe is the director, and is just superhuman, basically, and has overseen sort of various initiatives and the profile of the centre as a sort of outward-looking internationalist. But it's mainly for research. Yes, there's lots of activity in terms of engagement and working with different communities, and very inclusive. I think it's trying to be definitely not in its ivory tower. It definitely wants to come out and examine the role of poetry and all that sort of stuff. So I'd hope that it's a very inclusive and welcoming kind of space. It's had a history of various projects over the years. Some Arts Council funding to work with refugees back in I think they're just early in this the 2000s. More recently, we have started up the International Poetry Competition, which is, as it sounds, it's pretty global. And the bit that I think is I'm quite proud of is that it's in 2 categories. So one is for an open category, and one is specifically for English as a second language. So absolutely opening the door to poetries from different sources, and also just the amazingness of language. So there's sort of the mother tongue one, but also acknowledging that poetry can exist in different contexts. And I think it's that rewarding that, I think, is a good thing. And also the caliber and of poetry that comes through that route is absolutely amazing as well. So honouring that poetry can exist kind of above language, if you like. Poetry Centre does actually enjoy quite a good social media profile anyway. So we've got the weekly poem, which helps support smaller independent presses by profiling poems from different publications. So that, I think, there's a circulation of nearly 2,000 now. And we've got people, the individual academics will kind of follow their own individual kind of routes as well. So Eric White, who's been working on avant-gardes, who's been, I think, working with schools and their different projects. Neil's got a kind of separate other project, which is to do with commemoration and war veterans. So he's been doing work with poetry and war veterans, along with Susie Campbell, who's a PhD student. So there are lots of different sort of activities going on at any given time that are either collectively under the Poetry Centre or the activities of the members, academic members of that. Ignition Press, I think, looking back, can you remember the days when people used to give poetry readings, and they used to give poetry readings in the Beatnik, Albion? So I seem to remember sitting, listening to a poetry reading with Neil, and we've started the poetry competition. So I think we both are interested in doing new and different stuff. So I think we sat and we were listening to a reading, and we noticed that Les Robinson was sitting behind us, who just stopped doing Tall Lighthouse. We didn't know him from Adam, really, too. And I think Ignition Press just started with a look between Neil and I, which was, ooh, poetry pamphlet. We've never done anything like that. This is very interesting. We know nothing, but there's somebody in the room who has just, who has set up and has temporarily walked away from a poetry pamphlet press. How about we just have a little chatette to him, see how he looks, because we know nothing. And we literally didn't know anything, had a chat to Les, who was in a very, he just stepped away from Tall Lighthouse for various reasons, but is still a bit of a poetry pamphlet addict. So if there's a whiff of being able to do something, he was very interested in chatting to us. And so that, and then Alan Buckley, we also spoke to in the context of thinking of setting up a press based at Brookes. So with that expertise, and actually I did quite a lot of behind the scenes sort of justification of the business plan to the powers that be, in order to say, this is the basis we'll set it up for. These are the advantages for the university. It won't ever particularly make money, but this is a good thing, and it speaks to various agendas. And so completely naively, in a way, we set it up and relied heavily on Les and Alan's input. And yeah, last year won the Michael Marks Poetry Pamphlet Publishers Award, which was one of the kind of determiners of success that we dreamt of early on. So yeah, that's been very gratifying. There was quite a lot of pre-thinking about actually the pamphlet as a form, pamphlet as a thing. We thought about digital, but then we all agreed that actually we liked it as a thing. Les was very adamant about having a spine so that you can see the title, that it actually looks like a book. And Tall Lighthouse has quite a distinct style. So he was going that there needs to be a visual identity. We agonised a lot about the logo and the name. So Ignition Press was chosen, and we wanted all that to reflect that sense of sparking initiative and beginnings. So there was quite a lot of thinking about how all those themes reflected within the physical object and also within the design. And we were lucky to get a designer called Flora from Carline Creative, who ran with it. She was very good at interpreting the brief and all the arguments we had about colour schemes. But what's very good about that particular team is we say what we think, and then somehow we all agree and arrive at a consensus, which seems to have worked very gratifyingly and successfully. Very nice. We knew that pamphlets was a kind of introductory form, so we were looking at emerging poets of any age. It can be emerging at any stage of your life. And also, at the beginning, we thought that it might be a vehicle for more established poets who might want a little projectette. That actually materialised, but I don't think we've closed the door on that as a possibility. So because we had no credibility to begin with, because we weren't at all known, we actually asked our networks to recommend people. So, for example, other MA programs or other academics that might be teaching, to look out and recommend particularly promising students. We kept an eye out for things we liked, so keeping an eye on competitions, for example, if there were any newish poets that we liked the look of. So it's been a process of networking and recommendation. It's not an open process, mainly because of scale, and we didn't know if anybody wanted to publish with us to begin with, because we weren't particularly known. But we were very lucky that Mary Jean, for example, was looking to place a pamphlet at that stage. So yeah, we were very keen for it to be international, to be representative of lots of different ways of writing poetry. And I think ultimately it's sort of what strikes us. Les is very interested in fresh approaches and things coming off the page and arresting and a lack of cliches. So we have some kind of rough criteria. What hits us, and the other thing about working across different people is that you find out how different things strike people differently. So I think between us, we have a nice breadth of very interesting and high quality poets. We do try and do a really stringent selection process. So actually it's done as unknowingly as possible. So stuff will go to Neil, who anonymise everything. And then we'll have maybe 9-10 submissions of about 10 poems where we look at them not knowing who the poets are. It's all highly technical. We rank them. We have numbers. We've got a sheet that we mark things on, and then we do not quite mud wrestling for the final 3. And we don't, sometimes we do 2 if we don't feel the quality's there I don't want to say quality. I think the readiness is probably a better word. Yeah. Some poets are not quite ready. It doesn't mean that they won't be at a later stage. So maximum 3, just because I think it's a kind of good number. But we've done 2. This current batch is 2. So yes, we try and keep a sort of pattern, but we're not completely sticklers for it. When we select the poets, we nominate a working editor. Les remains head editor. He has oversight of all of it, and we refer back to him. But actually, it's quite a prolonged process of editorship. So mentorship, I think we can take 4 or 5 months to work up a manuscript with the poet. So it's quite an intensive and reciprocal arrangement, and it's worked, I think, in all of the instances, really. So it's not like you've given us your manuscript, we publish it. There's very much sort of seeking to put the best poems together to make the pamphlet. So maybe that somebody's got lots and lots and lots, in which case we'll put them together and work on a theme. So there's quite an intensive editorship that goes along. Les's mantra, which I entirely uphold, is that what we would want to do is put something together that the poet is proud of in 6, 10, 12 years' time. I find it really interesting and a huge privilege to be allowed into the work of another poet. So it's always with respect. It's an extension of those kind of workshopping skills that you have with other people, and that one-to-one is very trusted one. I've been very lucky to work with, in every instance, poets who are so keen to develop and listen and take input. Sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes it's absolutely perfect, but sometimes things aren't quite clicking. And the other sort of thing about the publishing, I think that's important, and I'd like to bring in as part of the production thing, is that we are blessed with a typesetter. So some, for example, some of the conversations might be about how we set it out. If somebody's got a very interesting form or want to expand the sort of format, we are able to go, yeah, we've got such a great typesetter that actually there's very little in terms of experimentation or how you want to set it out on the page that we probably can't accommodate, because that's, I wouldn't want the restrictions of the page to restrict the poet's imaginative use of form. But I think that's part of the editoring role that maybe the new poet wouldn't think of, is how it works on the page. The press has taken that sort of professionalising of poets to heart, in that we've run a couple of courses to help people professionalise their approach to their poetry. There are so many courses about how you can generate more poetry or write more poetry that actually support poets who are thinking of getting a pamphlet together with the kind of nuts and bolts of. So the courses are kind of an extension of the editoring mentorship, in we're supporting poets thinking through what is a pamphlet, what is my pamphlet, how do I get it together. Ignition Press is seeking to do that sort of international approach, but so there are examples of the latest one. There are two American poets, for example. Michaela's based in Oxford, and we've got Jacob, who's doing Latinx poetry. I think it's that eclecticism, really. I think that's one of the things I actually really love about this selection of poets. They're very specific, and their experiences are specific, and their experiences are expressed in extremely interesting ways. But there is something that resonates across all of them, how we struggle in our lives and our situations, or we revel in our lives and our situations. So I think if there's one thing across all of them, it's that sort of how we try to come to terms with our human situation through the medium of language. That's the bit that excites me and ignites my interest in it as well.
And now to our sample. First poem you will hear comes from Kitchen Boombox by Jacob Anthony Ramirez, one of the two most recent poets to be published by Ignition Press.
The Lives of Jazz Fathers. Let's resurrect the trumpet players, the saxophonist's name for fauna gone extinct in the Congos and barrios, the worship and wail, the shadow song of 40s noir, black and white ailments of New York's terminally cool. There are no more quartets, only quartered ensembles split from cities coated to chin, faces blurred white in pedestrian winds and yellow cabs. Now the drummers search estate sales, rummage for swivel stools to post on Etsy. The bassists study phlebotomy, read blood panels for diabetes. The pianists work dental offices, drill tartars to reveal the whites of cuspids. The saxophonists teach Tai Chi classes, sleep at the Chinatown Y. I mean to say I miss them, the notes who stroll October for pickup chess in parks with coffees and fingerless gloves, the chop chords at brick and mortar steakhouses, the soloist's smile in the amber memory of nightclubs numb with intoxication. They're dead. The blue veranda is silent where they jammed, moon drift in palm leaves and ivory, notes of copper and zinc.
The second poet in this most recent launch is Michaela Coplin. Here she reads a poem from her pamphlet, Finishing School.
View. If I were more like my mother, I'd know what to do with all these ends. Chicken bones, tomato stems, the inner ribs of peppers. Another thing for the list of things I'll ignore until I can't. Spider webs just out of reach, the puddles beneath the fridge. Honestly, I don't remember much about her cancer. It happened in a different room. It was happening so fast. Last night, In a fit of genius, we nailed the doorstop to the floor. Now I can see almost everything. The triplets in the garden, the women smoking on their steps, a collection of silver cans. The windows of the funeral home on the corner are papered over. Crosswords and the tabloid ads for local naked ladies. Where I grew up, the major roads are lined with these invitations. Trucks shudder to a stop. The pawn shops are always open. The ghost town only miles away has smoldered for 60 years. Fire caught a vein of coal and no one can put it out. Here, I watch the city trains emerge from underground. We brace against the frequency. They pass at different speeds. You're going somewhere, aren't you? The pavement winks like a lesson, and the mattress they pushed from the neighbor's house when she died is still on the curb, folded, holding its ankles, flashing the whole wide street.
Daniel Fraser's pamphlet, Long Iron, was published in 2020. Here he reads his poem, Hebden Bridge.
Hebden Bridge. Wool skies turn over heavy cloud. The pages of a good book stuck somewhere between wickedness and flood. A gurgle of rain meadows, pictures unfit for sport, long hedgerows littered with chapsticks, cider bottles, and damp tubes of old fireworks, their excitements decidedly past tense. This is the place you still call home, an answer arrived at just by asking the wrong question too many times. The landscape an impossible pattern of fields, dry stone and cart tracks, brickwork lines tangled around dark farms, terraces milled in childish strokes of grit, raw-edged and smoky. The canal churns through creaking locks, bleak with weed and fat perch and reeds, where shadows of imported carp nudge blunt snouts through the thickened silt. Men sit switching stories on damp canvas, stools sunk low in the towpath, one hand on a sandwich, another dipped in the red husks of maggots, the fresh bait struggling free, fluffed like rice, writhing too. Shop fronts boarded or bought up, shaken dry and franchised into nowhere. Chrome and steel, exposed light bulbs, railway salvage, their high chairs polished by the acutest music. You can still buy crystals, eye talismans and stone webs for catching dreams, false promise as unorthodox practice, strung out on silk. Commerce the one sure way to heal the wounds time has forced you into keeping. 15 pubs, 3 per 1,000. More yesterday. Rooms where you can watch the same face age through its endless afternoons. Doorways hung with pretty chimes, wicker and knotted twigs, scents of incense, marks of incest, park benches warped in a fog of weed and needles. Out beyond the council blocks lie the sewage plant and dump, broken dye works and coal silos, industrial leftovers clumped with white goods and rust, jaws and iron arms crushing waste, weary of reconstitution. Hold on, there are still the old mills, oak woods and carpets of bluebells, mill ponds still with sediment, and the great moors swept hard like a birthplace for the wind. The whole place picture perfect, yes, a land where poetry comes easy, skimming the dark crags and fattened beaches growing high above the river murk. Voices cheering, drowning out the yeasty spume and froth, brimming deep, lower even than the world.
And the last poem in this very limited selection is from Patrick James Errington's pamphlet, Glean, published in 2018. This is Still Life. with approaching crow.
There's nothing to distinguish this from the last 300 fields they pass, but for whatever reason they call it far enough. The engine shaking off its sound, voices dripping from their mouths to the ground when they say, "Let's go." They won't mean everyone this time. Beyond, a field frozen solid, expressionless, stubbled with broken grain. They'll leave him loose as teeth in his life, lashed to a fence post. Blood gently unlacing the features from his face, and every wound unwinding from its pain like wire. It'll be days before anyone can tie the term missing to what it has to mean. The field in his flesh grows significance against their will.
These poems, selected almost randomly, should indicate the high quality of the Ignition list. You can learn more about these and all the other Ignition Press poets from the Oxford Brookes website. You'll find the link on poetryworthhearing.biz. And now we turn to our other poets. First, I'm delighted to have a poem from Dinah Livingstone.
Sky. When I wake up, it's morning, new light. I gaze at the sky, today a faint blue, gathering strength. Its shining fills me, my eyes, my whole being, lifts up my heart. At this moment, intensely happy, I breathe a sigh. I see the shapely London plane trees reaching up their summer green as if to touch it, but they cannot. They are rooted in earth. The sky is not a solid vault above. It is our atmosphere, our breathing space surrounding all us planetary citizens. It is not a fixed domed lid keeping us down under it, governed by an autocratic supernatural realm on high, to which, if we obey, we can aspire. It is what we breathe, here, where we are at home, and on a morning like this, my inspiration.
And now, 2 poems from Richard Lister.
Motherwell's Muse. I cross from New York's Sunday-softened streets into the Guggenheim Museum and fall in size until I am but the few draft lines that populate a sketch that's focused on a building's shape and space and flow. Step into a gallery and stop like a smashed watch. Vast canvas. A Motherwell. 3 dark and ragged ovals, each unique. The tall, the thin, the fat, on a ground of white and tan, blocked in by massive columns. Elegy to the Spanish Republic, number 110. A lifelong series of lament. Strange theme for an American who never saw Spain. Motherwell, as a cod-pale boy, stumbles from the Californian waves, his lungs rasping, gasping at insufficient air. Death becomes his muse and grows. When the artist is 21, Spain detonates into civil war. Neighbour stabbing neighbour. People with the faces of God tumbled into mass graves like carcasses with plague. He pares it all back to the black husks of lives and the searing white sun. Celebration in P major. You, the letter P, are of uncertain origin. I taste a tale. A plosive popping on my lips, explosive dynamite, bright bringing fright. You end the jump, space hopper clumping and clodhopper thumping. You punctuate, stepping in stops and pauses, spiking puddles to tether sound. With a double bang, you're a power pylon that strides as confident as a giant, frizzed hair crackling with ozone. The Semitic pay, from an early sign for mouth, spun round by the Greeks to suit their left to right writing, and turned to pi. Apply. The ap of ply, the son of a slender strip of wood, why so proud of its parenthood? Apropos sounds like a car struggling to start in Latin. You start the prototype, a sponge-blown chair and squeakless springs, a gaunt shape of levers that can never pull, a go-kart tipping at the point of fall. Geronimo from crest to toe. You, the letter P, a precious tale.
Two poems, very different in tenor. Now we move on to Lizzie Ballagher, whose poems have a distinctly Scottish flavour.
Weavings. The pattern on the ground of feet stepping to the skirl of pipes to the rhythm of a melody. The pattern of a melody to the purling of a stream, of a highland stream to the weft and weave of braided tweed. The pattern of island tweed to a filigree of lichen fronds, their woven ochre, umber, crimson dyes. The pattern of their weaves to the herringbone of peat stacks to the lick and lift of waves on broken coasts. The pattern of the waves to chants of psalms in cliff-top chapels, of chants to the splice and twine of vines upon their wires. The pattern of the vines, Celtic curlicues on monuments, infinite and intricate, plashing in and out on pressed peat crosses. The pattern on the peaty earth of feet stepping to the skirl of pipes to the ribbon of a melody. The pattern is no tangle but a purpose in our wanderings, in meanderings and weavings into leavings of our lives. Feast of Fiddles. I am one, I am many melodies interwoven, as brave and bright as any tapestry. Inviting you to clap, tap, stamp, I hurtle away, without a hint of mockery, to call our clansmen from their crags and highlands. I switch, fizzing with song, puckish with laughter, bowing, plucking every note until you dance with me, breathless, rapturous, in awe. And when you're failing, falling, can go no longer, cry, enough! Listen, I compel you, hear my eloquence, my doubled strings, my tripled voices, stop. Your toes and singing tongues, wait while I haunt you with gulls, birds that wheel and call along the estuary, sounding wild spaces over water, conjuring journeys, journeys over waves and shores until, prophet-like, a bard among folk who once were strangers, I bring you utterly to a stand, invoking then for you changes of the mind or heart, healing tears, laments in the valley days of mourning, and giddy, effervescent joy.
I love the way Lizzie uses sound in her poems. Something different now. A prose poem from Vanessa, Lampert.
Swimming. Some people take their children to church on Sundays. Others go swimming. This is one of the differences between your childhood and mine. You are afraid of water, its depth, its intention to fill your lungs. You favour the shower over the bath. On holiday in a hot country where the swimming pool is an undeniably enticing, polished blue, we will enter together if the shallow end is truly shallow by your definition, which is to say that the water must not reach higher than your navel. You will stay in the shallow end, standing very close to or gripping the bar that runs around the pool. Which option you take will be determined by the proximity of others. I swim up and down, quickly becoming bored. I usually join you in the shallow end after 4 or 6 lengths. Sometimes I laugh at you, swishing one arm cautiously or lifting one foot off the tiled floor. But while I am not laughing and just standing beside you, the fact that I can swim and you can't swim doesn't matter. We are just 2 people, 1 man, 1 woman, both hip high in water, but with only the man holding onto the rail running round the side.
And the last poem in this section comes from Mervyn, Linford.
The Weatherman. He often woke early, before sunrise. Neighbours would wonder why, as he started his car and drove between the fields of Suffolk, slowly, deliberately. Often a star would hang on the cusp of dawn and daylight with an inquisitive twinkle in its eye. As the car progressed, deer would stop and wait as he drove on by, wondering. A strange time to be out and about, said the rookery. Jackdaws, in the manner of the liturgy, were antiphonal. A priest opens a book in the rectory, wisdom not done. Words were beginning to form, epiphanies. He stopped by the river as usual. Swallows and swifts were cuneiform as they dipped to slake their thirst, or was it to peruse the trick of light, their altered selves, like icons? By now the sun, no longer on the edge, red and teetering, had risen and moved on as gold contracted. It was there he pledged so many years ago to honour Pan. Pan and pantheist seemed appropriate. Not prone to panic, he wanted to scan the measure of the earth, the unspokenness of animals and flowers, insects and birds, rivers and woods. Every day he drove out before sunrise and listened. Eventually, the world began to say what he thought he heard. It was like tongues, Pentecostal, yet pagan. The earth's own lingua franca, the quanta of the sun, the inside of a seed somehow sown with a sacred language, translatable. It was nearly noon, time to drive back home, wherever home was. The rooks were waiting, and they spoke. A deer was amazed, knowing what he knew. A priest raised his eyes, closed his book, and thought about sermons. Swallows swerved around his house cursively. Neighbours looked out from behind curtains, and they observed a difference, like noticing themselves. The ringdoves were syllabic and meaningful. The small-leaved lime was selfless, and the world was cumuli and blue, the sky linguistic.
And now back to Ignition Press. It's a great pleasure to include this extract of a reading given on May the 30th by Fathima Zahra, whose pamphlet Swargam was published in 2021.
This first poem is called Suitcase. Here's to the ones that waltz into this world with suitcases. The ones who've learned early to pack all their memories, goodbyes, and clothes into 23 kilograms in cabin baggage. You are a dossier of every last place you fell in love with. You are the Lebanese diner next to the first house that watched you bruise your knees. You are the rickety swing in the backyard of your granddad's house in Peru. You are every bridge across the Thames and the people crossing it. You, with your hummus-loving heart and your dancing tongue that'll lift, twist, and settle 3 languages, but trembles at any mention of home, bait, kar. Here's your suitcase, with every last goodbye from friends that are now a thumbtack on a world map. Here are your dreams for a compass, your parents' prayers, a life vest. I moved to England about 5 years ago now. And as you may have gathered from the poem, I kind of grew up between different places. I call Saudi Arabia as well as India my homes. And this poem kind of came from, at that time, I was thinking a lot about where home was and what it meant to belong or not belong. And you're going to hear a lot of that in the poems that I read, the different places and the different languages that I grew up with as well. The second poem I'm reading is the title poem. It's called Sargam or Swargam. Sargam was the name of the community events for the Muslim Malayalis where I was growing up in Jeddah. And the word Sargam is also one letter away from meaning heaven in Malayalam. Sargam. I mishear my friend say she went to heaven for the weekend. How everyone danced all night. How her parents lost their frowns in the crowd. How there were string lights everywhere. I asked her why she left. I was 6. God knows I don't still picture Jannah the way I did. I think of my classmate droning in her best sermon pitch. You know, Al-Bakia, those come flying to you in heaven. There's never been a version of heaven that didn't hold my whole life. Of date palms and Cornish picnics, where the sun squeezed our headaches alive. Of all the things I said goodbye to. Loss slept in the house coated by sand, where I watched the world from a periscope, my days punctuated by the azan. I've downsized my dua since. They exchange outfits at the gates of heaven. Asks about a boy, asks about a dead grandfather. Of all the heavens I've hoarded, I like the one with the flying boxes of fried chicken best. The one where the bouncers say salam. This next poem is after a place that kind of was my favorite haunt before the pandemic and before it became impossible to kind of visit regularly. London Aquatic Centre, Stratford. The first time you wear a bikini in public, its ladies are at the local pool. Your mother's disapproving brows follow you. The changing room is filled with ghosts of middle school girls' staccato laughter. Your skin winces with no place to hide. You stand in front of a mirror wishing you could be reduced to a sliver of light. You picture knives caressing your hips. You walk down the hall to a symphony of rapid Bengali. You breathe it all in and jump. Here, you could be rainbow fish or electric eel. This next poem is a golden shovel, and it's taken from one of my favorite lines from Andreas Simon's movie, whose name has completely slipped out of my mind now. But yeah, this is Brown Girl's Anthem. We die so many deaths before we turn 20. We, the schoolyard Kardashians. We sue our stories and rip them out as the school bus pulls up at our door. We cast out our wild tongues so the aunties won't. Scrape it so they won't know where to look for nipped buds. So much is lost in undoing shame. Before we learned glory, we talked of our love lives to walls. History didn't erase us. We did it ourselves. Things I wish I could trade my headscarf for. A fishbowl, a space helmet, a tinfoil hat, bubble wrap, a shoebox, a handful of snakes, and it will still be the least suspicious thing in a train carriage. This country sings of all the ways it loves us, in the soft slip of hate mail through our front door. How eyes under furrowed brows walk me down the tube carriage. How men flip us off as my dad drives me to the train station. How a face peers out, window rolled down to scream Muslim. And I think, yes, I am. My scarf speaks parcel tongue now. Eggs strangers on as if to say, here is an empty goalpost. Kick those slurs in. I didn't sign up for this at 12 when Mum brought me pretty scarf to grow into someday. I wrote that poem kind of as a means to think through some of the terrible things that we were encountering and kind of didn't know how to speak about, and didn't even tell my parents, because I didn't want them to be scared of. And I wrote them when I'd first come to England. And I don't know if you've been following the news in India, but the way the government has kind of been cracking down on its Muslim citizens, a lot of my family and friends are now afraid. And some of them have been leaving if they have the chance to. It's become, the situation has become terrible for them to kind of go to their regular place of work, the educational institutions, and just exist. And, some of my friends have even taken to kind of taking off their headscarf because of fear of being abused or, encountering something in public. And yeah, I think having written this poem kind of a long time ago, it's weird, the resonances, which, I wish it weren't there. It has when I read it now. On a much different note, this next poem is kind of an ode to something that brings me a lot of joy and traditions and the community that I have missed since mowing. One of the things that we used to do leading up to Eid, which has just passed a month ago, or weddings, was the women used to kind of gather in a room the night before and put henna on each other's hands. And, you know, for the older women, it gave them kind of a chance to rest from preparing huge meals for the next day or things like that. But it was also a chance to kind of gossip and just be together. So this next poem is called Mehendi Ode. Last night, I drew some on again, craving the laughter of other women in the room, phone blaring the latest Bollywood songs, feeding each other ghee sweets with our one free hand. Oh, first teacher of patience, the slow drip of each second as I sink in my chair, eyes glued to my palms, waiting for the cool brown to dry. Oh, Muslim tattoo. Oh, human etch-a-sketch. How everyone asks of it at Eidgah. Who did yours? Which cone? How long? Each family's got their secret to turn it darker. Olive oil and cotton pads, lemon juice and sugar dabbed on after it dries. Oh, Chandrat and the long hours of cousins buzzing, copying designs from yellowed pages. They spin an R into arms dotted with flowers and paisley. Gossip leafed into each other's palms. These next two poems I'm reading are newer ones. The first one is called Pass. Boys are passing girls apples under the desk. It's the art of quick hands, the timed glance. There are bets on who, when, what kind of apple. My friends and I, we recreate the latest exchange at house parties, sit across each other on our bedroom floors, giggle while they chant. Go on then. Did you hear about the boy who hoarded apples? The girl with the butterfingers? Our parents held outside by the guise of a locked door and code words and texts. Crackling voices of boyfriends saved under Aisha's and Fatima's on our phones. I too am waiting for my glossy apple. I've perfected the receiving palm. A Cosmo masterclass. Don't care if he catches my eyes, if he remembers my name, or if he whistles after, like on the field, ears cocked for applause. Now, I have 3 younger siblings, and this next poem is an ode, as well as, I suppose, gesture of peace and solidarity to other eldest daughters I know. The Committee of Eldest Daughters meet once a month, if they can. When they aren't translating birdsong or writing letters of recommendations for the Committee of Wavering Sons, the Black Sheep. A kind benefactor hears of them in the newspaper, sends them a lifetime supply of bath bombs and essential oils. They remind each other to dress warm for the weather and take their sleeping pills. No one's got time for love. They remember the moment they realized their mother's love for them ran short. Somewhere, an eldest daughter is crumbling in her childhood bedroom, and the ants come to feast. This last poem I'll be reading you is also the last poem in my pamphlet. It's named after my favorite lipstick shade, 310 Canberra Tulip. During a lunch break, Lillian warns our gang, promise you won't tell, but my parents told me they see me through a secret camera, even when I'm at school. I bet yours do too. We half shrug, believe it's only another lie her parents fed her to stop her from bringing another detention note. On the bus ride home, I can't shake the feeling that she's right. This is why Uma knows when I'm lying about my marks on the class test or my half-eaten lunch. I'm sure Uma hides her camera under her hair. I hold the rein on my laughter, bite my tongue on a swear word. When I leave home, I still trip over my tongue, draw myself chalk lines to stay in when my roommates are out, losing their names in the mouths of boys. When I buy my first lipstick, a whole lotus blooms on my face. I've stopped mistaking the glint of shop cameras for Uma's gaze. Even when my phone vibrates when I stay out past 11. Especially when I fiddle in my seat at the cafe, my dress still damp from the September rains. I kiss a boy later that night. I don't think of her third eye then. Not even once. Thank you so much for being here and for listening and for your responses. I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
But my question is whether you use Arabic words at all or any other, Indian words in your poetry, or are you thinking about doing that in the future?
I do use them. I think maybe not as much in the poems that have just been published in the pamphlet. At home, we speak mostly Malayalam and English. And obviously we, have words from Arabic spill over kind of from our experience of having lived in Saudi for 17 years. But I don't know why when I write poems, a lot of times I think I used to translate myself, even if there was a word that I'd normally just say in Malayalam or Arabic, I'd leave it in English to the closest approximation of it. And I'm trying to do a lot less of that now because, I'm trying to honor the fact that it's okay for it to sound as natural as it does. And not everyone may fully understand the meaning of it, and that it'll still have some value, even if there aren't, words or particular words in slang that everyone would be able to access. Form is something I think about quite a lot, and I've been obsessed with it ever since I came across it I was part of this workshop with the Roundhouse, called the Roundhouse Poetry Collective for a while. And it was there our tutors introduced us to different poems, contemporary as well as classic poems in different forms. And to me, the idea of both restraint as well as being able to put in as much, it was quite interesting. And I'm still obviously learning, but I do think the different languages that I speak definitely influence my idea of it. There's quite a musicality to people speaking in Malayalam. I always pick it up, even if I hear a person who's speaking quite far away in a crowd on streets of London or somewhere, there is a distinct musicality to it, especially in different parts of Kerala. They're quite different. And even in Arabic, I think my obsession with language began when I started going for Quran classes, where our tutor would break down the root words and meaning. And it's quite vast and expansive than the English language can contain, a translation or transliteration of it. And I think while I might be writing in something that didn't necessarily come from India or Saudi, the meaning of language as well as the rules of the form definitely influence it, if that answers your question. Yeah. When I started out with poetry, I'd come across an open mic night where I was living in Bangalore, and I was attending those monthly and trying to share a poem every time I could go. And when I was performing poems a lot more often than necessarily, sharing them to publish or putting them out, the editing was mostly in terms of the audience reaction. I would have a poem or an idea of a poem and I'd write a version of it. And depending on which lines kind of elicit a certain reaction from the audience or not, I'd then edit them after. And obviously it's changed, it's changed now. I don't perform as much, but I do redraft kind of obsessively. And I think it's hard to kind of get it down to, it always starts off from an image, and it's hard to kind of get it to the exact approximation of it and what it looked like in my head. I think in images, and it's hard to get it down like a film. And I think I kind of feel like a poem is finished when I'm still excited by it or I'm still surprised by it. And that kind of element which started it, it's still there. It's not lost in editing and redrafting it. And sometimes for me, redrafting looks like, just changing the line endings or punctuation, which might seem small. But sometimes it is kind of a complete overhaul of the poem. It's just the images that are there, but they will change in form and the syntax and things like that. So yeah, it very much depends on the poem.
Some illuminating answers there. You can find out more about Zahra on the website poetryworthhearing.biz. In fact, you'll find information about all the poets featured in this episode, and of course the link to Oxford Brookes University. That's all for this episode. The next episode will be in September. I hope you've enjoyed listening.